Alright guys, so in this video we're going to demonstrate a dumbbell row, advanced row variation. So essentially when it comes to this particular variation, there's going to be a lot more involved in terms of the skill requirement is going to be relatively higher in comparison to some other alternative variations. We're going to be looking more at stability, coordination, the internal cue, the changes of direction, the control of the load through all ranges of motion. So there's going to be a lot more involved with this particular variation, and this is where a lot of people can get the execution wrong. So I want to demonstrate, first of all, what we commonly see people doing, which is that misconception of the execution of it, and then how we should actually be performing this variation and what we should be looking out for. So typically what we see with a lot of individuals when they're performing a dumbbell row is they're working through a vertical plane of motion, essentially. So that would look something like this. They get themselves into position and then they're just driving up like that. Essentially they're just hooking or raking the dumbbell and weight straight up towards the ceiling or the sky. That is that misconception, and that is poor execution of this variation. We're trying to contract the lats, we're trying to get the lats into a short position or as short as possible. And the way that we need to do that is essentially we need to create an arc motion. So as opposed to just driving straight up into that vertical plane towards the ceiling, we want to create an arc. So if you could just envision a invisible line, that invisible line will look something like that. So it's going round in an arc as opposed to straight up and down. So from here, what we're going to do to create a stretch on the lats and to lengthen the lats out, we want the dumbbell or the weight to pull us forward. So first of all, we're going to come down to here, and as you can see, my the dumbbell and the weight is in front of my humerus and in front of my rotator cuff, so the shoulder essentially. As opposed to finishing here, right underneath my humerus and rotator cuff, I'm finishing just in front. And then from there, the internal cue is we want to pull the elbow back towards my hip as opposed to straight up like that. So without the dumbbell, you'll see that I'm pulling the elbow back towards, and you can see that I'm now creating the arc motion as opposed to just straight up and down. So now with the dumbbell, this is how it looks. So create that stretch on the lat and then pull back like so. Down, stretch out the lat, and then back. And then when we get into that short position or short range, you're really thinking about driving our scapula down into depression. So if I was in this position here, I'm pulling down like that. So now here, I'm coming here and I'm pulling that shoulder down, the scapula down into depression as the elbow comes back. As I do that, I'm bringing the insertion of the lat closer to the origin of the lat, and that is going to create that maximally short position of the lat. Okay, so one more time, just to demonstrate. From here, out in front, pull, and then stretch the lat, drive the elbow back into the hip, and then you'll notice as you're performing this, it will be increasingly difficult in terms of the intensity, the internal cues that you're using. So therefore the loading capacity may drop slightly. So take that into consideration. Make sure that you're not just pulling straight up like this, because that's not doing anything for the lats, and that is the primary muscle that we are targeting in this variation, and create that arc motion.